Why did it take days for Donald Trump, President of America, whose British embassy is here in London, to condemn race-related violence in the US state of Virginia? It's a simple question with potentially an awkward answer. But the question is made unavoidable by Trump's delayed, blame both sides response to the violence which erupted on Saturday when neo-Nazis, skinheads and members of the white supremacist Ku Klux Klan chose to hold a demonstration in Charlottesville, Virginia. The town's Democrat mayor has spoken publicly of his anger at the president, accusing him of having gone right to the gutter and playing on people's worst prejudices. He has also linked these events with Trump's decision to seek votes in this way during the election. Perhaps in response, Trump slowly read through a statement about the clashes, saying he condemned hatred, bigotry and violence on many sides. The president was silent when journalists asked whether he rejected the support of nationalist groups, a silence which was praised by white supremacist website Daily Stormer. The deadly violence in Charlottesville matches a dramatic rise of far-right movements across the US. Trump denies that he's a racist or sympathetic to such groups. But as a presidential candidate, he proposed temporarily banning Muslims from entering the United States. He retweeted a post from accounts that appeared to have ties to white nationalist groups. And he was slow to reject the endorsement of former Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke. Has Donald Trump's presidency made white supremacists more willing to speak and act? And why is America suffering so much social division? Simple questions with important answers. The deadly violence on the streets of Charlottesville comes at a time of a dramatic rise in white nationalist movements across the US. What do you think is behind the re-emergence of these groups? That's what we asked the American public. Here's what they said.
These groups have been around a long time. It's just that once President Trump took office, they were able to take the hoods off and be seen because President Trump gave them power to be like, we don't have to hide anymore. So this isn't new. It's just that they're in everybody's face right now.
So I just feel like now, given the current climate and the rhetoric, the political rhetoric, there's a belief that this is okay to express, that it's been there, and we can see that not only through statistics but also through what's been going on in law enforcement and that in our justice system, and now it's been elevated and open, and in a way, and in that way, it's become acceptable for it to be expressed.
Well, I think these groups have been present all along, but what has encouraged them right now is having Donald Trump in the presidency. They feel they have a kind of official encouragement to do what they're doing.
So after the Civil War and Emancipation and Reconstruction, white people invented Jim Crow. And after the Civil Rights Movement and the expansion of voting rights, white people invented mass incarceration. And now, after the first African American president, white people are banding together to fight all forms of justice for people of color.
I think it's a group of people that feel that they're losing hope and that the world is about to actually evolve into where there is no more racism. You know, because I'm praying that my two nieces that are now in elementary school, by the time they get in high school, will not recognize racism anywhere. So that's my view on it.
I think the real root cause does not lie with the far right. I think it lies with an economic system that has kind of exacerbated inequality and division over the last 10 years, especially since the 2008 financial crisis. Barack Obama got elected on a manifesto of change. He failed to enact that change. So now people want a bigger piece of the pie. And they're not going to listen to any establishment politician anymore. But as long as somebody offers change, I think they'll vote for them. And sadly, in this case, that does appear to be Donald Trump and the white supremacists.
The clear answer is, the rise of Trump and, the fact that he's in office and the campaign that he ran, right? But I think it's important to note that these groups have always been there. You know, it's not, the word re-emergence makes it sound like they've come back, you know what I mean? But I think the word I would use is maybe resurfacing. You know, they've been there all the way through since, you know, the KKK, all of these movements, they've been there all the way through. And I think it's just the fact that a candidate like Trump has come around and they've seen in him someone who's saying the same things that they say, you know, maybe in their homes or at their rallies or something like that. They now say he's saying these things running for the presidency, right? And even whilst he's been in office, you know? So I think in him they see someone who thinks the same as they do, and so has given them a confidence to say the things that they want to say and they have been saying out loud, and think that they're going to get national support, you know? So I think it's just now they're more in the public space than they were before, you know? I think that's the big difference.
A white nationalist drove his car into anti-racist protesters, injuring over a dozen and killing a woman. Yet President Trump condemned violence on many sides. Why did the president appear reluctant to condemn the violence inspired by racism and bigotry? We put that to the American public.
The president didn't condemn it because that's where his funds come from. And so therefore, if he condemned that, then he's going against corporate America. So therefore, if he go against corporate America, he can't do the things he need to do to keep his power.
All I can think of is that he doesn't want to offend part of his base constituencies.
One simple fact, his votes came from them white supremacists. They put him in office, so he had to figure out a way to say, I'm going to condemn violence without targeting them. So that's basically what that is.
Well, essentially because he identifies with the racists and the bigots. I mean, he's made that very clear. As early as in the 1990s in New York, when they tried to frame 5 young men for raping and almost killing a woman, they had no evidence against them. He took out an ad in the paper calling for them all to be put to death. He's a racist from way back, so of course that's his position.
I think he's very sensitive to anything that he does that's going to upset his base of followers, and I think that's part of it. But if you just look back, even before he became president, you know, going back to when President Obama was elected, he was one of those birthers, you know, who questioned where Obama was born and whether he even was a U.S. citizen. So I think his prejudice was ingrained in him many years ago.
I think it's because these people are the backbone of his support. I think they swept him to power. I think many establishment Republican politicians abandoned him the day he entered the White House. So he is completely reliant upon a kind of reinvigorated neo-Nazi movement. I think he made a real point to condemn both sides for 2 reasons. The obvious one is it does take away attention from the people who sustain him as president. But second, it's because I feel that the protesters who went onto these streets to fight fascism were actually quite successful in their attempts. I think that is the correct way to go about things, and I think if history teaches us anything, it's that in the 1930s, the Nazis weren't defeated by liberals writing witty columns in the New York Times. I think they pose a real threat to Donald Trump, and that's why he's come out just as aggressively against them as he has the neo-Nazis.
Well, it's very clear that these people who Trump failed to condemn are the people who got him into office in the first place, right? So from when he's in a position where these people have committed acts of violence against protesters, he's not going to come out and condemn them, because those are the people who got him into power, right? And in the same way that all politicians do, he doesn't want to alienate the people who are going to get him perhaps into power next time, right? And he's saying the things that they have been saying in private. He's not going to come out and attack those people, right? And in that protest, it's very, very clear that he's going to then try and condemn the other side or make it look like it was some kind of equal fight, when there's 2 very, very different sets of people there. One set of people are there to try and come out in support of murder, of racial violence, of the subordination of a group of people, African people primarily, but also, Jews, Muslims, whoever else. And the other side of there saying, no, this is wrong. We're human beings, right? These our lives are important, right? All of these groups' lives are important.
President Trump has proposed to introduce a Muslim ban and made negative comments about Mexicans and threatened to build a wall. Does the public in America think his actions and comments have emboldened white supremacists?
If anybody need to go, it's white supremacists. This land is more our land, people of color land, than white supremacists. And so therefore, what he's saying is totally incorrect, and I stand for against the ban any day.
It could be so, yeah. It could be so, yes. That they feel that there's a more acceptance and permission.
And you can see all the Muslims here in America of African descent. That's divine. Divine has returned us to our natural way of life. So that's what they fear.
I certainly do. Yes, they have. I mean, he's what they've been dreaming of, and they know that any kind of concession he makes to the other side is just a formalistic matter.
It's sad to see that it's come to this, and I definitely think his comments have emboldened racists and the white supremacists. Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's given everybody permission. It's given everybody cover to enact their worst instincts and impulses, not just along lines of race, but also along lines of ethnicity, along lines of gender, and along lines of religion.
It gave them hope, I would say. It enhanced their want to be superior.
They've definitely emboldened white supremacists. Members of the Ku Klux Klan used to wear hoods. The neo-Nazis in Charlottesville didn't feel the need to, because in their opinion, they are the new mainstream. They're no longer outsiders. And that's because they've seen the president of the United States ape their rhetoric, cozy up to their media, make incredibly derogatory comments about Mexicans, Muslims, and pretty much anybody who isn't a white American male. So of course they're confident and they're emboldened, and the responsibility for that lies largely with the rise of Donald Trump.
So the obvious answer is yes. That they obviously feel like they can now say the things in public that they've been saying in private for for years, right, for decades, centuries. It might have gone a bit more underground now, but since the emergence of Trump, like I said, because they've got him into power, they have this newfound confidence. But I said these things have always been said; they've always been there. I think the difference is now, one, because they have someone very in the most public place in America to be able to say these things, they then feel like they can act on this, and this is like a catalyst for them to say these things out loud and to act on these things, right? But again, you have to always remember this is a political process, right? This is a political maneuver, right? And so he came out saying these things about Mexicans and about building a wall and about banning Muslims, and they tried to implement these things in order to forward an agenda, right? Those people who are supporting him are clearly for that agenda, right? And it's just another way to divide people, in this case specifically in America, from seeing the bigger picture, that this guy, as much as he wants to come out and say that he's somehow opposed to the establishment, he's very much a part of it. He's, this is a very, very rich, wealthy white man who's, in power. That's nothing radical, that's nothing different.
The statistics for the Charlottesville attack paint a picture of injury and death. One person was killed by the assault. Another 19 people were wounded. A US civil rights group, the Southern Poverty Law Center, is also tracking over 1,600 extremist groups in America. The potential is there for many more Charlottesvilles. The violence is the first major domestic challenge of Donald Trump's presidency. Does the American public think he might further aggravate the situation with North Korea to divert attention away from the racism issue within the US?
I think that this is not his first challenge. I think that the executive order with the Muslim ban was his first tremendous challenge, and how he responded when the court struck it down of attacking the courts was so unprecedented and so frightening. Everything the man has done has been unprecedented and frightening, and this is just the latest episode.
With the violence that's being seen and with the white person being killed in Charlotte, now more people getting involved. So hopefully they will realize there's power in number and not money. So therefore, if everybody take a stand, this can be stopped. North Korean and everybody in the Republican Party stop, and they get in touch with their Republicans, their leaders, and have them fight against Trump, all this can be stopped.
I don't know if that's the intention. No, I think that it's hard to make that correlation. I'm not sure.
You know, I think that he does things to draw attention, not so much to divert attention. I think North Korea is a big issue, and so is the racism issue right now. You know, so I think they're linked, but I don't think it's one before the other.
Well, I don't agree that this is the first major crisis of his administration. I believe that the Muslim ban, the attacks on women, the attacks on our health care, the attacks on equality and on justice that have characterized his administration have been a series of disasters and crises. And he consistently tries to deflect attention from his bad actions by creating false enemies. So yeah, he'll probably do that.
That's an entirely plausible scenario. Quite an ironic one, actually, because Donald Trump tweeted previously during the Obama administration that he wouldn't be surprised if Obama started another bombing campaign in the Middle East because of his economic and domestic failures. I think it's a pretty common tactic to divert the public and the kind of docile mainstream media's attention away from the real issues, without a shadow of a doubt.
To be honest, I don't think it is the first major domestic issue that he's faced, right? It's maybe, you know, it's the one we're seeing at the moment, but all the way through his administration so far, there's been constant problems, constant protests, constant issues with the fact that this man is president and what he represents. The people who are supporting him have got him into power, like you said, have become emboldened. And it just seems that every single time there's a new issue, it just gets shifted. That country is the result of this split in a nation that really should be unified. Korea should be one place, right? It's only the result of Cold War politics, proxy wars that occurred over, you know, during the Cold War period and, you know, following World War II. That is a huge issue that doesn't really get brought into the conversation, right? The role that the West played and capitalism as a phenomenon played in the creation of the North Korean state, right? And essentially what they're trying to do is maintain their independence, right? They've said very publicly they don't want to be the same as Afghanistan and Iraq and Libya, right? And whatever the agenda is, all of this is deflecting away from that, right? And then, so to say that the North Korean issue is being used to deflect against the racist issues is true, but both are being used to reflect against each other, right? And so it's a situation where race politics in America are extremely, extremely complex and extremely ingrained in the society, that when it's getting this much publicity, of course they're going to try and deflect the attention away, right? Until that other issue gets too big and it'll work the other way.
From police killings to the violence in Charlottesville, why is the United States so desperately divided at the moment? Here's what the public said.
The president has given voice to this segment of society who are mostly white men who feel like they've been left behind. I also think it's a response to the fact that we had a black president who spoke for the people, and everything that Obama has done and all the gains he has allowed to come into place, this president is determined to dismantle, and it's a daily travesty. He does do a lot to divert attention from things that he's doing in the Middle East and elsewhere, but on every single policy front, he is an absolute disaster, not only for the American people, but for the people of the world. And we Americans, we're sorry.
Police violence in prisons, that's enslavement. It's a money-making thing. So therefore, the violence is not going to stop as far as corporate America and white supremacy, because that's how they make their money. So therefore, until we dismantle white supremacy in this system, all this racism and stuff is going to go on because it's money being made. So when it's all said and done, the system needs to be dismantled, not reformed, but dismantled altogether.
I think there's a whole variety of demographic and social reasons, and I feel like I said, it's been bubbling and culminating under the surface, and I feel like it's been rising the last 8 years when Obama's been in office. It's all been coming out, and now it's sort of culminating because this is sort of this seen as an opportunity.
And they're saying they don't care nothing about people of color. And what you people that's listening to this got to understand, they have lied to y'all, especially the foreigners, for hundreds of years about people of color here.
I think we've always been divided. And I think that people have always been willing to play the race card to ensure that we stay divided.
Well, I think that, the United States as a country has always been bitterly divided, despite the rhetoric of their politicians and media figures claiming that America is the land of the free. It's usually anything but. I think the problem has gotten a lot worse since the financial crisis in 2008. I think we've seen a kind of decaying centre ground who have largely had a monopoly on Western politics for the last few decades, and that power vacuum has been filled with populism on both the left and the right, trying to offer solutions to the problems that ordinary working people face every day. Now, the populist left in the form of Bernie Sanders was crushed by establishment Democrats, but the populist right in the form of Donald Trump has been a lot more successful. Now, I think the Rosa Luxemburg socialism or barbarism quote is more relevant than ever. The centre ground has tried, the centre ground has tried, the centre ground has failed miserably to stop the rise of the alt-right, and that's because they continue to push forward an economic policy which fuels Donald Trump and the far right. So I think the only solution to this problem, I've said it before, I'll say it again, hopefully somebody will start listening. The only way to tackle the kind of troublesome state that America is in is to fundamentally change the economic and political status quo in favour of ordinary working people. And until that happens, nothing less is going to suffice.
In my opinion, this is nothing new, right? The United States has always been divided on race issues, and it's to do with the fact that the very foundation of the society is based on the theft of the land from the indigenous population, the murder and rape of the indigenous population of the Americas, and then the enslavement and torture of millions of people of African origin who were taken from Africa to the continent, right? Over centuries. This happened over centuries, and this is, we often talk about the civil rights movement or people like Malcolm X fighting against these things, the Panthers, but this is just the latest, newest chapter in this story, right? So it's never been unified over this because the country was formed through these phenomena, through this process, right? I think the difference at the moment is that we have another generation now, after people like the Panthers were shut down and the new Panthers, other people other groups who've been fighting against this, we now have the latest generation of people who are not willing to take this. And with the police killings especially, this has happened all the way through, like I said. The difference is now we have cameras on our phones to be able to film this and let the world see it, right? And so for people of African origin in America, Mexicans, other people, it's just being shown to the world now. And with social media and these other things, it's a lot easier for this to come out and for the discussion to be put into a different direction rather than just through major news channels. You know what I mean? So it's something that's endemic in American society.
Trump has faced such moments before, and each time they generate swift criticism from former presidents and other senior politicians, regardless of party. But Trump has been cautious to condemn the violence and the hate. Indeed, his approach has even been accused of increasing racial tensions and strengthening extremism in America. So, has Trump provoked a rise in the far right in the US? Has he refused to condemn the white supremacy groups because he supports them? Trump supporters claim he is simply refusing to give in to political correctness. But he has been accused of seeking political advantage by courting the support of the far right. If he has, and this is the consequence, it could be another brick in the wall for his political popularity and, amongst many, his credibility.